CEO gets lost in a snowstorm and is rescued by the humble black woman whose warmth he can't forget. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching us from today. The shiny black car moved quickly through the busy streets of New York City. It looked like a shark swimming through water. Inside the car, a young man named Maximilian Storm was looking at his phone. He didn't even notice the bright and colorful Christmas lights shining on the tall buildings outside. Maximilian was only 28 years old, but he was already a very important boss in the fancy house-selling business. He wanted to become even more powerful. "Mr. Storm," said the driver from the front seat, "your father is on the other line." Maximilian sighed. "Tell him I'll call back. I have to finish these papers before I go upstate." The driver nodded and didn't say anything else. Maximilian had picked him because he was quiet and did his job well. Maximilian liked his relationships the same way: quiet, simple, and without any messy feelings. In his shiny office on the 45th floor of a big building, Maximilian looked over the papers for a new hotel deal in the mountains. This hotel, the Alpine Resort, would be the best thing his company ever bought. Maximilian had worked so hard for this, and he didn't let anything or anyone stop him. Suddenly, someone knocked on his office door. It was Jessica, his helper. "Your father called again," she said, looking nervous. Everyone was scared of Maximilian's father, even Maximilian. "What does he want?" Maximilian asked, still reading the papers. "He wanted to remind you about the meeting tomorrow and told you not to mess up the Alpine deal." Maximilian's jaw became tight. Even after everything he had done, his father still treated him like a child. "Tell him the deal is almost finished. I'm driving up there tonight to sign the papers myself." Jessica looked unsure. "There's a storm warning for the mountains. Maybe you should wait until morning." "The world doesn't reward people who wait, Jessica. You should know that by now." 2 hours later, Maximilian sat in the back of his car while his driver drove through snowy mountain roads. At first, the snow had just been falling lightly, but now it was coming down hard in a big blizzard. The trees on both sides of the road were heavy with snow, making a spooky white tunnel. "How much longer?" Maximilian asked, looking at his watch. "About 40 minutes, sir," said the driver. "But I think we should turn back. The storm is getting really bad." "That's not an option. Keep going," Maximilian said. The driver held the wheel tighter but didn't say anything more. Maximilian looked at his phone, reading emails. Then he noticed the screen getting dark. His battery was only at 5%. "Oh no," he whispered, looking for his charger. But before he could find it, the car started to slide on the icy road. It happened very fast. The tires couldn't grip the road. The driver tried to control the car, but it spun once, then twice, then broke through the guardrail. Maximilian felt like he was flying before the car slammed into a tree and finally stopped. Everything was silent after that. Snowflakes came in through the broken window and landed on Maximilian's face. He blinked, trying to understand what had happened. The car was tilted and the front was crushed into a tree. "James?" Maximilian called to his driver. A soft groan came from the front seat. Maximilian unbuckled his seatbelt and carefully moved to the front. James was awake but had a big cut on his head, and his leg was stuck under the dashboard. "My phone is dead," Maximilian said. "Where's yours?" "Left pocket," James whispered. Maximilian took James's phone, but it was broken. The screen was shattered. "I need to find help," Maximilian said. "Can you move?" James shook his head. "You shouldn't go out there, sir. It's too cold." But Maximilian was already putting on his nice wool coat. It was fancy, but not warm enough for a snowstorm. "I have no choice. I'll bring help." As soon as Maximilian stepped outside, the wind and snow hit him like a wall. His coat didn't help much, and his leather shoes got wet right away. He looked around, but he couldn't see the road. The car must have fallen down into the forest. Maximilian started walking uphill, hoping to find the road. Every step was hard, his face hurt from the cold, and he couldn't feel his fingers. The watch on his wrist, a gift from his father, felt like it was laughing at him. What good was being rich if you were freezing? He didn't know how long he had been walking when he fell to his knees. He felt like giving up. Then he saw a small light in the distance. A light! Maximilian stood up and walked toward it. It looked like a small cabin with smoke coming out of the chimney. He used the last of his strength to reach the door and bang on it. Everything was starting to go dark, and he was so cold he couldn't even shiver. The door opened, and warm air came out. A woman stood there, but Maximilian couldn't see her clearly. "Help," he whispered, before falling. Celine Hawthorne was putting a log into the fireplace when she heard a loud knocking at the door. She lived alone in the woods, so visitors were rare, especially during a snowstorm. She was careful. A woman alone in a cabin had to be smart. But when she opened the door and saw the man falling, she didn't think, she just acted. She caught him before he hit the ground. "Dad!" she yelled. "I need help." Her father, Darius Hawthorne, came from the back room. He used a cane because he was 65 and not very strong anymore. But together, they pulled the stranger inside and put him on the old couch near the fire. "He's freezing," Clara said, taking off his snowy coat and shoes. "Get some blankets." While her father got the blankets, Clara looked at the man. Even though he was cold and hurt, she could tell he wasn't from the area. His clothes were fancy and his haircut was neat. What was someone like him doing in a blizzard? She wondered. "He needs to warm up," her father said, coming back with blankets. "Those fancy clothes won't help in weather like this." Clara wrapped the blankets around the man and gently tapped his face. "Hey, can you hear me?" The man moved a little and mumbled something. "I think he's in shock," Clara said. "Help me make some tea." Her father put the kettle on. Clara rubbed the man's hands to get his blood moving. His fingers were very cold and turning white. She ran to the kitchen and filled a bowl with lukewarm water. "Not too hot," her father warned. "It can hurt him more." Clara nodded and gently placed his hands in the water. As she worked, she looked at his face. He was handsome in a serious kind of way. Even asleep, he looked like someone who didn't smile much. After about 20 minutes, the man opened his eyes. They were a bright blue like the winter lake. "Where am I?" he asked. "You're safe," Clara said. "You fell at my door. Do you remember what happened?" The man tried to sit up but winced in pain. "My car? There was an accident. My driver is still out there." Clara looked at her father. "Where did you crash?" she asked. "I don't know. Somewhere off the road. We went through a guardrail." Darius picked up the phone on the wall. "I'll call Sheriff Dawson. He can send help." "The roads will be too snowy," Clara said, "but maybe someone can go on a snowmobile." While her father made the call, Clara turned back to the man. "What's your name?" "Maximilian." "Maximilian Storm," he said, like it was supposed to mean something. "I'm Clara Hawthorne. That's my father, Darius. You're at Hawthorne Christmas Tree Farm, though we don't sell many trees now." Maximilian looked around. The cabin was small and cozy. The furniture was old but clean. A little Christmas tree stood in the corner with handmade ornaments. It was nothing like the fancy trees at his office. "I need to make a call," he said, trying to sit up again. "It's important." "Phone lines are down," Darius said, "and there's barely any cell service here. The sheriff said he'll send someone, but it might take hours." Maximilian looked upset. "I have to be in Alpine Falls by morning. There's a contract." "You're not going anywhere tonight," Clara said, handing him a mug of hot tea. "You almost died out there. Business can wait." Maximilian looked like he wanted to argue, but then he started shaking. Clara tucked the blankets around him. "Drink your tea," she said. "You can eat when you're warmer." Maximilian took the tea. The heat hurt his hands but also felt nice. "Thank you," he said. The words felt strange. He couldn't remember the last time he truly thanked someone. As he drank the tea, Maximilian realized how close he had come to dying in the snow. In New York, he controlled everything. Here, he was helpless. Clara moved around the cabin making soup and bread. There was something special about her. She wasn't like the women Maximilian usually dated. They were models or rich ladies. Clara wore warm clothes and had her brown hair tied back simply. But her eyes were warm and strong. She looked at him like he was just a regular man, not a big boss. "Your driver will be okay," she said, seeing his worried face. "Sheriff Dawson knows these mountains well." "I should be there when they find him," Maximilian said. "And get lost again?" Clara asked. "The best thing you can do is stay warm." Maximilian was surprised. People didn't talk to him like that. Even his workers were scared of him. "Do you know who I am?" he asked. Maximilian sat down, feeling a bit awkward. Clara raised an eyebrow and said, "Should I? I'm the CEO of Storm Luxury Properties. We build fancy homes all over the country. Well, Mr. CEO, right now you're just a man who almost froze to death and is lucky to be alive. So eat your soup and rest. Your title doesn't mean much in a snowstorm." Darius, who was sitting in his armchair, chuckled. "That's Clara, always telling it like it is." Maximilian wasn't sure if he should be offended or impressed. He took a spoonful of the soup. It was simple but really good, warming him in a way that felt more than just the heat of the soup. Outside, the wind howled, shaking the windows of the small cabin. Maximilian thought about James, his driver, still stuck in the car. He felt guilty. He should have listened to James when he warned about the storm. "Tell me about your driver," Clara said, sitting across from him. "What's his name?" "James Reynolds," Maximilian answered. "He's worked for me for about 3 years." "Is he married? Does he have kids?" Clara asked. Maximilian opened his mouth to answer, but stopped. He didn't know. He worked with James almost every day, but he had never asked about his personal life. "I'm not sure," he admitted. Clara didn't say anything, but the way she looked at him made Maximilian feel a little ashamed. He quickly changed the subject. "So, a Christmas tree farm?" he said. "Isn't that just seasonal work?" "It is," Clara nodded. "But I also do freelance graphic design the rest of the year. And Dad has his pension." Darius proudly added, "She could be making good money in the city. She graduated top of her class from design school." "Wait, your dad?" Maximilian asked. "Yeah," Clara warned. "I came back here to take care of him." Maximilian looked at Clara with new curiosity. "Why would you give up a career to live here, in the middle of nowhere?" "Not everyone measures success by money, Mr. Storm," Clara replied. "I came back because family matters more than a fancy job." Her words hit Maximilian hard. In his world, success was everything. His father had taught him that since he was young. After his mother died when he was 10, his dad, Harrison Storm, had only one rule: be stronger, smarter, and more successful than everyone else. "Don't expect life to be fair," his dad would always say. "The only person you can count on is yourself." Looking around at the small cabin and seeing how Clara and her dad cared for each other, Maximilian felt a strange emptiness inside. When was the last time anyone had a real conversation with him that wasn't about business? When had anyone looked at him with warmth instead of just seeing what he could do for them? The phone rang. It was Sheriff Dawson. Darius picked it up. "They found your car and your driver. He's being taken to the hospital in Alpine Falls. But he'll be okay." Maximilian felt a huge wave of relief. "I need to get there." "Not happening," Darius shook his head. "The sheriff says the roads are all blocked. No one's getting in or out until the storm clears." Maximilian ran his hands through his hair in frustration. "You don't understand. I have to sign those contracts by noon tomorrow. If I don't, the deal will fall through." "I understand just fine," Clara said calmly, "but unless you can control the weather, you're stuck here for the night. Sometimes life doesn't go according to plan, Mr. Storm." Maximilian felt trapped. No amount of money or power could help him now. For the first time in years, he felt completely powerless. Clara seemed to notice his distress. "Look, it's getting late. Why don't you get some rest? You can take my bedroom and I'll sleep on the couch." "I couldn't." Maximilian started to protest, but Clara interrupted. It's not up for debate. You're still recovering from hypothermia. You need proper rest. Too tired to argue, Maximilian let Clara show him to a small, neat bedroom. A homemade quilt covered the bed, and there were paintings of the mountains on the walls. "Did you paint these?" Maximilian asked, pointing to the artwork. Clara nodded. "Just a hobby." "They're good," Maximilian said, surprising himself. "You have talent." A faint blush appeared on Clara's face. "Thank you. There are extra blankets in the chest if you get cold," she said. "The bathroom's down the hall." As she turned to leave, Maximilian caught her hand. "Thank you for saving my life." Clara's eyes widened, but she didn't pull away. "Anyone would have done the same," she said. "No," Maximilian said, shaking his head. "They wouldn't have." They looked at each other for a moment, then Clara gently pulled her hand away. "Good night, Mr. Storm." "Maximilian," he corrected. "Please call me Maximilian." "Good night, Maximilian," she said softly before closing the door behind her. Alone in the bedroom, surrounded by the smells of pine and wood, Maximilian felt disconnected from his usual life. The business deals, the endless meetings, the constant chase for more. Everything seemed distant now. He drifted off to sleep, and his last thought wasn't about his work or his father's disappointment. He wondered what Clara Hawthorne's life was like, and why a talented woman would choose this simple life over success in the city. For the first time in a long time, Maximilian Storm was curious about someone else's life. The next morning, sunlight came through the small window, waking Maximilian from the deepest sleep he'd had in years. For a moment, he didn't recognize where he was. The ceiling was made of wood instead of the sleek white of his penthouse. The air smelled of pine and something delicious cooking. Then it all came rushing back. The accident, the blizzard, and Clara Hawthorne, the woman who had saved his life. Maximilian sat up, feeling sore, and noticed his phone on the bedside table. It was still dead. Next to it were a folded shirt and jeans that looked like they might fit him. He changed quickly and went to the kitchen. Clara was flipping pancakes on a cast-iron skillet. "Good morning," she said, looking up. "How are you feeling?" "Better," Maximilian admitted, "but I still need to get to Alpine Falls as soon as possible." Clara placed a stack of pancakes on the table. "Dad went to check with the neighbors about the roads. The storm's passed, but there's almost 3 feet of snow. The plows probably won't get here until this afternoon." Maximilian clenched his jaw in frustration. Every hour that passed was putting his deal in danger. His father's voice echoed in his head. "Excuses are for the weak, son." "Is there a landline I can use?" Maximilian asked. "I need to make some calls." Clara pointed to the phone on the wall. "The lines are up now? Coffee?" Maximilian nodded gratefully and went to the phone. He dialed his assistant's number. "Jessica, it's Maximilian," he said in a low voice so Clara wouldn't hear. "I've been in an accident. I'm fine, but I'm stranded somewhere. Actually, I don't know where exactly I am. Hawthorne Christmas Tree Farm." "About 15 miles east of Alpine Falls," Clara called out from the kitchen. Maximilian relayed the information and then continued. "Call Alpine Resort and tell them I need an extension on the signing, and send a helicopter as soon as the weather clears." He hung up and turned to Clara. She was watching him closely, her expression unreadable. "Your world doesn't slow down, does it?" she asked. "It can't afford to," Maximilian replied, sitting at the small kitchen table. "There's too much at stake." Clara sat across from him, holding her mug. "What's so important that you risk driving through a blizzard?" Maximilian took a bite of the pancakes. They were delicious, fluffy and golden. They tasted nothing like the protein shakes he usually had for breakfast. "I'm acquiring Alpine Resort," he explained. "It's the center of a new luxury development we're planning. Vacation homes, a spa, a golf course, the works. It's going to change this whole area." "Change it how?" Clara asked, sounding concerned. "Economic growth, jobs, tourism. It's a win for everyone," Maximilian said. "Not for those who like things the way they are," Clara replied. Some people choose to live here because they want peace, not fancy resorts. Maximilian studied her face. Most people he worked with either admired his vision or wanted to profit from it. Clara's skepticism was different. Progress is inevitable, he said. Those who resist it get left behind. Is that what you tell yourself to justify bulldozing over people's lives? Clara asked, her voice calm but sharp. Before Maximilian could respond, the door opened, and Darius came in, shaking snow from his boots. Roads are still blocked, he announced. But Harrison Wolf's snowplow is attached to his truck. He says he'll clear the way by noon if the county hasn't gotten to it by then. Thank God, Maximilian said with relief. I need to check on my driver at the hospital and then get to the resort. Darius hung up his coat. Harrison also said they found your car. It's a total loss, I'm afraid. Maximilian shrugged. It's insured. Clara raised an eyebrow at the way Maximilian dismissed the loss of his expensive car. He felt uncomfortable under her gaze. I should make some calls, Maximilian said, suddenly feeling awkward. Darius stopped him. Hold on, young man. The phone can wait. You still owe my daughter a proper thank you for saving your life. Dad, Clara protested. No, it's not fine, Darius insisted. You gave up your bed, cooked for him, and this guy acts like it's all expected. Maximilian's face heated up. The older man was right. He had been so focused on his business that he barely acknowledged what Clara had done for him. You're right, sir, Maximilian said. I haven't thanked you properly, Clara. What you did last night, not everyone would have helped a stranger in that situation. Clara's expression softened. Like I said, anyone would have done the same. No, Maximilian shook his head. They wouldn't have. Clara looked at him with quiet understanding. In my world, people do things because they care, not because they expect something in return. Her simple truth hit Maximilian hard. When was the last time someone had done something for him without expecting anything back? Even his so-called friends were just business connections. A sudden thought came to Maximilian. Can I see the Christmas tree farm? Clara raised an eyebrow in surprise. Why? I'm curious, Maximilian admitted. I've never been to one before. Clara exchanged a look with her father, who nodded. All right, Clara agreed. Let me get you some proper boots first. Those Italian shoes won't last 5 minutes in the snow. 10 minutes later, bundled up in coats and boots, they stepped outside. The world had been transformed overnight into a beautiful winter wonderland. The snow covered everything, sparkling in the bright sun. The air was crisp and fresh, unlike anything Maximilian had ever experienced in the city. Maximilian was amazed as he looked at the beautiful sight before him. The snow was covering everything, and the tall trees stood proudly in the cold winter air. Celine smiled at him, and it was the first real smile he had seen from her. It made her face light up and her eyes sparkle. There was even a small dimple in her cheek when she smiled. The farm starts just beyond those trees, she said, pointing to the edge of the forest. It's not much these days, but it used to be my grandfather's pride and joy. She began to walk ahead, and Maximilian followed her through the deep snow. Their breath made little clouds in the cold air as they passed by a line of tall pines. When they reached the end of the trees, the land opened up to reveal rows and rows of Christmas trees, some small and some much larger. Most of them were covered in snow, and the sight was like something from a holiday card. We have about 5 acres of trees, Celine explained as she walked ahead, showing Maximilian the farm. Some of these are ready to be cut down and sold this year. Others won't be ready for 4 or 5 years. It's a constant cycle. How does it work? Maximilian asked, curious. Do people just come and cut down any tree they want? Celine laughed, and her laugh sounded bright and clear in the quiet of the snow-covered forest. Not exactly. We mark the trees that are ready, and people come and choose one. We'll cut it for them, or if they want, they can cut it themselves to get the experience. Maximilian listened carefully as she led him deeper into the farm. She pointed out different types of trees. These are Fraser firs, these are blue spruces, and those are white pines, she said. Maximilian was fascinated by how much she knew about the trees and how much she loved the farm. The business has been slow the last few years, Celine said as they reached a small shed at the far end of the farm. The big stores sell fake trees for half the price, and there's another tree farm closer to the highway that gets most of the weekend visitors. Maximilian didn't understand why she kept doing it if it wasn't making money. So, why keep doing it? He asked. In his world, when a business wasn't doing well, people gave up on it. They didn't keep working hard for something that wasn't paying off. Celine looked a little sad as she answered, "This land has been in my family for generations. My grandfather planted some of these trees, and there's still something special about a real Christmas tree, something that an artificial tree can't replace." She bent down to touch a tiny sapling barely peeking out from the snow. "This little guy will be someone's Christmas tree in 2030. Isn't that something? Planting something now that will bring joy for many years. It's hopeful, don't you think?" Maximilian had never thought of things like this before. In his business world, everything was about making money now, not waiting for something to grow and be useful in the future. "What if it doesn't survive?" he asked, not understanding why Celine would keep going if there was a chance the trees wouldn't last. "Then we plant another one," she said simply. "That's life. You can't control everything, but you just keep trying anyway." They walked along, talking easily now. Celine told Maximilian about growing up on the farm and her years in the city for college. She told him how she came back home 2 years ago when her father's health began to decline. "He had a mild heart attack," she said. It wasn't very serious, but it scared me. I realized that spending time with him was more important than my career." Maximilian couldn't imagine giving up everything to come back home. "You gave up everything to come back?" he asked, surprised. Celine shook her head. "Not everything. I just changed my priorities. I still do design work remotely. It's not the fastest way to success, but it's enough. I don't regret it." Maximilian thought about her words for a moment. "But don't you regret the things you could have done if you hadn't come back?" he asked. Celine stopped walking and turned to face him. "Do you ever wonder what you might be missing, Maximilian?" she asked. "What connections, what meaningful experiences you've given up because you only focus on success? Don't you wonder what else is out there?" Maximilian was taken aback by her question. No one had ever spoken to him like that before. His employees were too afraid to talk to him like that. His father was too focused on making money, and the women he dated were only interested in his wealth, not in challenging his views. Before Maximilian could answer, a truck with a snowplow attachment appeared, driving toward the cabin. "That must be Harrison," Celine said. "Looks like your ride out of here is coming soon." Maximilian felt something inside him hesitate. The peaceful time he'd had at the cabin with Celine was about to end. Soon, he would be back in his world of business and deadlines. He didn't want to leave. At the cabin, Harrison Wolf, who worked on the farm, confirmed that the main road had been cleared. "I can drive you to Alpine Falls whenever you're ready," he said. Maximilian nodded and went inside to pack. He changed into his own clothes. They were dry but wrinkled from his time in the cabin. His phone was still dead, and that felt strangely good. He was glad to have a few more minutes away from the busy world he lived in. When he came out, Celine was waiting for him. She handed him a small paper bag with sandwiches. "It's about an hour to Alpine Falls," she said. "You didn't have to do this," Maximilian said, touched by her thoughtfulness. "It's no trouble," she replied. An awkward silence fell between them. Maximilian knew he should leave. He had business waiting for him, and his driver was in the hospital. But something inside him made him hesitate. He didn't want to leave just yet. "Clara, he began, unsure of what to say. "You should go," she interrupted gently. "Your world is waiting." Maximilian nodded, reaching into his pocket for his wallet. Let me give you something for your help, for the food, the clothes, everything. Celine's face closed up. We don't want your money, Maximilian, she said. I insist, he said, still trying to offer her something. It's the least I can do. Celine's voice turned cold. Is that how you solve all your problems? By throwing money at them? Maximilian was taken aback. It's not like that, he said, trying to explain. I just want to show my gratitude. Then say thank you, Celine said. Not everything has a price tag. Maximilian felt embarrassed. He had meant well, but his words didn't come out the way he wanted. Celine sighed. You just don't understand, she said. Maximilian was about to say something else, but Harrison honked the horn outside, and the moment was lost. Celine handed him the bag of sandwiches and opened the door. Goodbye, Maximilian Storm, she said. Good luck with your resort. Maximilian hesitated at the door. Will I see you again? He asked. Celine gave him a sad smile. Why would you want to? We live in different worlds. Because I've never met anyone like you, Maximilian said, and the words came from somewhere deep inside him. Celine looked at him with surprise in her eyes, or maybe it was just her own feelings reflected in his. But then she looked away. Safe travels, she said quietly. Take care of yourself. Maximilian walked out to Harrison's truck, his footsteps crunching in the snow. He looked back at the small cabin with its smoke rising from the chimney. Celine stood in the doorway, a solitary figure in the warm light from inside. Harrison started the truck, and they drove away, the cabin growing smaller in the side mirror. Maximilian felt a strange ache in his chest, as if he was leaving something important behind, something he hadn't even known he was looking for. That's some good people, the Bennetts, Harrison said as they drove. Salt of the earth. Yeah, Maximilian replied quietly. They are. The truck moved along the snow-covered roads toward Alpine Falls. Maximilian's mind began to race again, focusing on the business deal waiting for him. But a small part of him stayed behind with Celine, in that cabin where he had felt for the first time in a long time like someone had seen him for who he truly was, not for his wealth or his power, but for who he really was. Back at the Alpine Grand Resort, Maximilian walked through the lobby, and the buzz of activity stopped as people noticed him. The change in energy when he entered the room was something he was used to. But now, after spending time at the cabin, the shiny marble and bright lights of the resort felt almost fake. His resort manager, Richard, hurried over. We've been worried since we heard about your accident. Are you okay? I'm fine, Richard, Maximilian replied, quickly putting on his business mask. Where's my team? They're in the conference room, sir, Richard said. Maximilian nodded and made his way to the conference room, where everyone was waiting. Jessica, one of his employees, stood up as soon as he entered. Maximilian, thank God you're okay. We've been trying to reach you. The team of lawyers and executives looked relieved. At the head of the table sat the one person Maximilian was dreading to face, his father, Harrison Storm. Harrison's hair was perfectly styled and his suit was flawless. His cold blue eyes looked at Maximilian critically. So you decided to join us after all, Harrison said, his voice distant. The owners have extended the deadline until 5 today. Maximilian nodded, trying to keep his emotions in check. He felt different now, but he didn't know how to explain it. I'll speak to the owners privately before we sign, Maximilian said. After the meeting, Maximilian went to visit James, the driver who had been injured. James was in a hospital room, his leg in a cast. Maximilian had never visited an employee in the hospital before. Thank you for everything, Maximilian said, trying to be kind. James looked surprised. It's no problem, Mr. Storm. Maximilian didn't know much about this man, but he found himself asking, Do you have a family? James smiled. Yes, I have a wife and 2 daughters. They'll be fine. Maximilian felt strange. He had never thought about his employees' lives beyond work. He realized he didn't know much about their lives or families. Back at the resort, everything was going smoothly with the deal. His team had worked out most of the details, and only the final paperwork and signatures were left. Maximilian checked the paperwork, and everything seemed fine. But then he decided he wanted to talk to the owners of Alpine Resort in private before they signed the papers. The elderly couple, Mr. and Mrs. Keller, were surprised but happy about the request. Maximilian took them into a smaller room to talk. Mr. and Mrs. Keller, before we finalize this deal, I want to be honest with you about our plans, Maximilian began. We plan to make big changes to the resort. We'll be adding a new luxury condo complex, and we'll be expanding the main building. Mr. Keller nodded. Yes, your team showed us the designs. It's going to change a lot about this place. Maximilian agreed. Yes, it will. Some of the local people might not be happy with the changes. Mrs. Keller sighed. We've run this place for 40 years, and it's part of our community, but we're getting too old to keep up, and our children don't want to take over. What about your staff? Maximilian asked. Most of them are local, right? All of them, Mr. Keller replied. Some have worked here for many years. For the first time, Maximilian felt unsure about the changes he was making. He had only seen this project as a way to make money, but now he was thinking about how it would affect the people in the community. I'll make sure we keep as many of your staff as possible during the changes, Maximilian promised. And we'll try to work with local contractors when we can. The Kellers seemed relieved, and Maximilian realized his father was watching through the glass wall, looking disappointed with him. After the meeting, Harrison, Maximilian's father, pulled him into the hallway. What was that about? Promises like that will cost us money, Harrison said. It's the right thing to do, Maximilian replied. The right thing? Since when do you care about that? Harrison asked. Our job is to make as much money as we can, not play hero. Maximilian stood up for himself. Can't we do both? Make money and also respect the local people? Harrison didn't seem impressed. Did you hit your head out there in the woods or something? You're supposed to be making money, not thinking about being a good guy. The rest of the day passed quickly, filled with paperwork and handshakes. By the evening, the deal was done, and Storm Luxury Properties officially owned Alpine Resort. But instead of feeling happy, Maximilian felt empty inside. At dinner, surrounded by his team and partners, Maximilian couldn't concentrate. His mind kept drifting back to a little cabin and a Christmas tree farm far away. He wondered if Celine, the girl he had met during the storm, was out there now. Did she think about him? After dinner, Maximilian didn't want to keep celebrating. He went back to his hotel room, took off his tie, and stared out the window. The view was beautiful, with snow-covered mountains and the resort's lights glowing in the distance. In the far distance, he could see the direction of Hawthorne Christmas Tree Farm. Was Celine out there, sitting by her fire, reading a book? He wished he could call her, but he didn't even have her phone number. It bothered him more than he expected. The next morning, instead of preparing to leave with his father, Maximilian wrote a note to his assistant, Jessica, explaining that he would drive back later. He arranged a rental car and drove toward the tree farm. When Maximilian arrived at the Hawthorne cabin, it looked different in the early morning light. It seemed smaller and more isolated. Smoke was coming from the chimney, and Maximilian could tell someone was awake inside. He sat in his car for a few minutes, unsure of what he was doing. Finally, he stepped out and walked to the door. Before he could knock, Celine opened it. I saw your headlights, she said, holding a mug of coffee. It's hard to miss visitors out here. Maximilian felt awkward. I hope I'm not interrupting anything. Just my morning coffee, Celine said with a smile. She invited him inside, and they sat by the fire in the cozy cabin. Dad's still asleep, she said, noticing Maximilian looking around. Maximilian took a mug of coffee and sat at the kitchen table. Did your business deal go well? Celine asked after a quiet moment. Maximilian nodded. The deal is done. Congrats. Celine said, but her voice was calm, not too excited. So, you're going back to New York? She asked. That's the plan. My father is expecting me this morning, Maximilian replied. But I needed to see you again. Celine's expression softened. Why? She asked quietly. Maximilian struggled to explain. I've spent my whole life chasing success, thinking that's all that mattered, but meeting you, it's made me question everything. Celine looked at him. I didn't do anything. I just live my life the way I believe in. Maximilian shook his head. But you showed me what really matters. Family, community, and doing work that means something, not just making money. Celine set down her mug. Maximilian, what are you doing here, really? Maximilian felt unsure. I don't know. I just know I couldn't leave without seeing you again. Celine looked at him carefully. And then what? You go back to your world of big buildings and takeovers, and I stay here with my dad and my trees? Maximilian's voice was soft. It doesn't have to be like that. Celine raised an eyebrow. You'd give up everything for a Christmas tree farm? No, Maximilian said, but maybe I could create something better. Something that helps people, not just makes money. Celine was quiet for a moment. That would mean changing who you are, changing everything at your core. That kind of change doesn't happen because of one snowstorm and a pretty girl. Maximilian nodded. You're right, but meeting you made me want to try. Doesn't that count for something? Celine didn't answer right away. Then, the sound of a helicopter grew louder. It was landing nearby. They both looked outside. Let me guess, Celine said dryly. Your dad. Maximilian nodded. Probably. The helicopter landed and Harrison Storm stepped out. He looked at the small cabin with a frown and then walked toward the door without waiting for an invitation. Maximilian, the board meeting starts in 3 hours. We need to leave now, Harrison said, ignoring Celine and her father. Celine stepped back, looking at Maximilian. You should go, she said softly. This is your world calling you back. Maximilian's heart felt heavy. I don't want to go, he admitted. I know, Celine said, but you have to. Maximilian sighed. I don't want to leave, but I have to. I know that's your life, Celine said, but it doesn't have to be my life. Maximilian looked at her, his eyes full of hope. Let me try to build something better, something real. Celine met his eyes, and for a moment it seemed like she might say yes. But then she shook her head gently. It's not that simple. Maximilian asked for a chance to prove he could be more than the man who had arrived on Celine's doorstep. The helicopter's engine roared outside, reminding him that his time was running out. I have to go, Maximilian said, his voice full of sadness. But I'll come back. I promise you, Celine, this isn't goodbye. For a long time, Celine didn't say anything. Then she reached up and gently touched his face. Don't make promises you can't keep, she said softly. Maximilian wanted to say more to make her understand that he truly meant every word. But just then, the helicopter's horn honked loudly, and the moment was gone. With one last look at Celine, standing in the doorway of her little cabin, Maximilian stepped back into the world he'd always known. As the helicopter lifted off, he looked down at the Hawthorne Christmas tree farm, getting smaller and smaller. He wondered if leaving was the biggest mistake of his life, or if staying would have been an even bigger one. Beside him, Harrison handed him a folder of papers, already thinking about the next deal, the next business. Maximilian took the folder but didn't really pay attention. His thoughts were still back at the farm with Celine, the woman who had changed everything for him in just 2 days. You'll forget her within a week, Harrison said, reading his son's mind. And she'll forget you. When you're back to business, everything will be the same again. Maximilian didn't answer. He wasn't sure if his father was wrong, and that scared him. How easy it would be to slip back into his old life, to let Celine fade like a dream. But as the helicopter turned toward New York and the tall buildings came into view, Maximilian made a promise to himself. This time would be different. This time he wouldn't forget her. 3 weeks had passed since Maximilian left the Hawthorne Christmas tree farm. The bright lights of New York glimmered outside his big penthouse window. Everything in his life had returned to normal. Business meetings, dinners, and contracts. Everything was the same, except for Maximilian himself. "Mr. Storm," his assistant Marcus said, appearing at the door. "The team is waiting in the conference room for your decision on the Alpine project." Maximilian nodded and picked up the folder filled with the plans he'd been reviewing since he came back to New York. He'd asked his team to rethink the Alpine resort project, and they had been shocked, worried, and finally impressed as Maximilian pushed them to see a new vision. In the conference room, his team and architects waited nervously. Harrison sat at the far end of the table, watching his son closely. He didn't like the changes Maximilian was making. "Let's get started," Maximilian said, sitting down at the head of the table. "I've looked at all the plans, and I've made my decision." The room tensed. A lot of money was at stake. Maximilian's reputation as a tough businessman was on the line. "We're going with Plan C," Maximilian said. "The eco-friendly plan that keeps the resort's character while also supporting local businesses and protecting the forest." There were murmurs around the table. Plan C wasn't the most profitable, but it was still a good choice. It was the right choice for the community, even if it wasn't the best for making money. "Son," Harrison said, his voice tight with disapproval, "we need to talk about this privately before you make a final decision." Maximilian interrupted. "Storm Luxury Properties is changing direction, starting with Alpine." After the meeting, Harrison followed Maximilian into his office and closed the door behind them. "What are you doing?" Harrison demanded. "That plan will cut our profits by 30%. You're going to ruin everything." Maximilian stood his ground. "It's not just about making money. It's about doing the right thing for the people. I want to create a place people love, not just one they can afford. I want to leave a legacy of helping communities, not pushing them out." Harrison looked at his son with cold eyes. "This is about that girl, isn't it? You're throwing everything away for a country girl who looked at you the right way." Maximilian didn't respond. It wasn't just about Celine, but part of him knew that she had helped him see what was missing in his life. His father sneered. "You're making a mistake. The board will never go for this. And when everything falls apart, don't come crying to me." When Harrison left, Maximilian sank into his chair, feeling drained. He had spent 28 years living to get his father's approval, but now he was doing things his own way. It would take time to get used to that. He looked at his phone. For 3 weeks, he had thought about calling Celine, but he didn't know what to say. Words seemed like they wouldn't be enough. He needed to show her how much he cared. That evening, he sat at his desk with a piece of cream-colored paper, not his company's letterhead, but simple paper. He wasn't Maximilian Storm, the CEO right now. He was just Maximilian, a man who had found something special in a snowstorm at the Hawthorne farm. Meanwhile, Celine worked hard at the farm, serving customers, making wreaths, and helping her father with the Christmas rush. Since Maximilian left, she had tried to forget about him. It felt silly to think about someone she had only known for 2 days. But still, sometimes she found herself looking up when headlights appeared on the road, hoping it might be him. "You've been quiet lately," her father said one evening. "Thinking about that city guy?" Celine smiled a little. Her father always knew what she was thinking. "It's silly, I know." Her father shook his head. "Not silly. He was different. I could see it in the way he looked at you." "Men like Maximilian Storm don't end up with women like me," Celine said. Darius smiled. "Maybe not, but then again, most men like him don't end up half frozen on our doorstep either. Life has a funny way of surprising us." Celine wanted to believe him, but as the days passed, no word came from Maximilian. She started to think maybe he had forgotten her, half busy with his business life in New York. On Christmas Eve, the farm closed early. The last customers, the Hawk family, had just left when Darius called out to Celine, Come quick, you need to see this. She hurried inside, finding her father standing by the window, pointing at the road. A black SUV was slowly driving up the snowy path. Is it him? Darius asked, excitement in his voice. Celine's heart raced. It might just be a late customer. The SUV stopped, but when the door opened, instead of Maximilian, a driver in a uniform stepped out and walked to the door. Miss Hawthorne, he said when Celine opened the door, I have a delivery for you. The driver handed her a simple white envelope with her name written on it in elegant handwriting. Who sent this? Celine asked, but the driver just shook his head. I was told to deliver it. Merry Christmas. Celine stood in the doorway, staring at the envelope as the SUV drove away. Well, Darius said, aren't you going to open it? Inside, Celine sat by the fire and carefully opened the envelope. It contained a letter written in strong, masculine handwriting. Dear Celine, I've started this letter 100 times, trying to find the perfect words. But I'm learning that perfect doesn't matter. Being real does. The night I stumbled to your door, I was lost. I had everything I was supposed to want. Wealth, success, power. But I felt empty inside. In the warmth of your cabin, I found something I didn't know I was missing. These last few weeks have been the hardest of my life. Not because of business, but because I've been struggling with who I really am. The man who left your cabin that day isn't the same man writing this letter. I don't expect you to believe me. Words are easy, but actions matter more. That's why I redesigned the Alpine Project to support local businesses, preserve the forest, and respect the community. It's a small step, but it's just the beginning. I'm not asking you for anything. I haven't earned that right. I just wanted you to know that 2 days with you changed my life. If you ever want to reach me, I've included my private number. No pressure, no expectations, just an open door. Wishing you and your father a Merry Christmas. Maximilian. Celine read the letter over and over again, tears filling her eyes. It wasn't a big grand gesture, just honest words from a man trying to change. You okay, sweetheart? Darius asked, watching her carefully. Celine nodded, wiping a tear away. He wrote me a letter, and he's trying to be different. Darius smiled gently. People can change, Celine. Your mother always believed that. She saw the good in me when no one else did. Celine remembered how her father had been different before meeting her mother, hardened and angry. Her mother had shown him another way to be. I don't know what to do, Dad, Celine said softly. Darius took her hand. You'll figure it out. You always do. Just remember what your mother always said. The heart knows what it wants, even when the head tries to talk it out of it. Celine smiled, remembering her mother's words. Outside, snow began to fall softly, decorating the Christmas trees. Celine stood at the window, watching the snowflakes dance in the porch light. Somewhere out there, Maximilian was spending Christmas Eve alone. The thought made her heart ache. I'm going out for a bit, Celine told her father suddenly. In this weather? Darius asked, raising an eyebrow. Celine nodded. I need to make a call first. An hour later, Celine sat in Harrison Wolf's truck, driving through the snowy night. The roads were quiet, with most people already home for Christmas. You sure about this? Harrison asked, glancing at her. It's quite a drive in this weather. I'm sure, Celine said, feeling more certain with each passing mile. Thank you for doing this. Harrison smiled. Your dad and mine were friends for 40 years, the least I could do. Harrison laughed and said, Your dad and mine were friends for 40 years. The least I can do is help you. Plus, I'm curious to meet this guy who's got you driving through a snowstorm on Christmas Eve. As they drove toward the Alpine resort, Clara felt nervous. What if Maximilian wasn't there? What if he was there with someone else? What if his letter was just words and didn't mean real change? But when they arrived at the resort, Clara pushed those worries aside. Sometimes you had to trust your heart, even when your mind was full of doubt. Want me to wait for you? Harrison asked as Clara got out of the truck. Clara shook her head. No, I'll figure it out. Thank you again, Harrison. Merry Christmas. The lobby of the resort was decorated for Christmas with a big tree covered in lights. Some guests were walking around, but the reception desk was empty. Clara went to the counter. "Excuse me," she said to the young woman behind the desk. "I'm looking for Maximilian Storm. Is he staying here?" The receptionist raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Storm is in the owner's suite, but he's not seeing visitors tonight. Would you like to leave a message?" Clara paused. "Could you please call him and tell him Clara Hawthorne is here?" The receptionist seemed unsure, but she picked up the phone. Clara waited, her heart beating fast. After a moment, the receptionist's face changed, and she said, "Yes, sir. Right away." She hung up the phone and turned to Clara. "The elevator is to your right, top floor. Mr. Storm is waiting for you." The elevator ride felt like it took forever. Clara watched the numbers go up, wondering if she was making a mistake. But when the doors opened, all of her doubts went away. Maximilian was standing there, dressed casually in jeans and a sweater. He looked so different from the businessman she had last seen. He looked shocked, like he couldn't believe she was really there. "Clara," he said, his voice full of emotion. "What are you doing here?" Clara stepped out of the elevator, suddenly feeling shy. "I got your letter today." "I wasn't sure you would," Maximilian said. "It was a good letter," Clara said simply. "I meant every word," Maximilian said, still looking at her like he couldn't believe she was standing there. They stood there, the space between them full of feelings they hadn't said yet. Then, Clara took a deep breath and stepped closer. She placed her hand on his chest, feeling his heart beat fast under her hand. "I couldn't stop thinking about you," she admitted, "even when I told myself it was crazy." Maximilian put his hand over hers. "I thought about you every day, every hour." "Show me," Clara said quietly. Without saying anything, Maximilian led her into the living room of the suite. Papers were spread out on the coffee table, blueprints, sketches, and documents about the Alpine project. "I've completely redesigned it," he said. "I want it to be different." Clara looked at the plans, amazed at what she saw. Instead of tearing down the land for a big resort, Maximilian had designed cabins that were sustainable and fit in with nature. There were hiking trails, a community center, and a forest that would stay protected. "This isn't what I expected," Clara said, amazed. "It's just the beginning," Maximilian said. "I'm going through everything in my company. Some of my board members think I've lost my mind, and my father." He smiled a little. "Let's just say he's not happy about the new direction." "That must be hard for you," Clara said, knowing how important his father's approval had been to him. Maximilian shrugged. "It's harder than I thought, but it's also freeing. For the first time, I'm making decisions based on what I believe is right, not just to impress him." "And these changes," Clara pointed at the plans, "they're because of me?" "They're because of you," Maximilian said gently. "Not for you. You showed me a different way to see the world, a better way. What I do with that is my responsibility." Clara was deeply touched. He wasn't trying to impress her. He was changing because he wanted to, not because he wanted something from her. "I'm proud of you," she said softly. Maximilian smiled, surprised and thankful. "No one's ever said that to me. Not like that." Clara looked around at the fancy suite. It was so different from her simple cabin. "This is still your world, though, and mine is still back at the farm." "I know," Maximilian said, taking her hands in his. "And I'm not asking you to leave it. I would never ask you that. But maybe we can find a way to bring both worlds together, if you're willing to try." Clara asked, "What are you suggesting?" Maximilian laughed softly. "I don't know exactly. I just know that I don't want to lose you again. These last few weeks have been the loneliest of my life. Even when I'm surrounded by people, you made me feel seen. Really seen." Clara understood. She felt the same way. "It won't be easy," she warned. "We're very different people." "Different, yes," Maximilian agreed. "But maybe we need what the other has. You ground me. You remind me what really matters. Maybe I can show you that dreams can be bigger than you've let yourself believe." Clara looked down, thinking about her father. "My father needs me." "I know," Maximilian said, "and I respect that. I'm not asking you to choose." The snow was still falling outside. It was almost midnight, Christmas Eve. "I should go," Clara said reluctantly. "Harrison Wolfe drove me here, but he's gone home now. I need to find a way back." "Stay," Maximilian said softly. "Just tonight. There's a guest room, and we can figure everything out in the morning." Clara hesitated, then nodded. One night wouldn't change everything, but it would give them time to talk, to start building whatever this might become. "Merry Christmas, Maximilian," she said softly. Maximilian smiled, that rare, genuine smile she remembered from their walk through the Christmas tree farm. "Merry Christmas, Clara." Later, as Clara stood at the window in the guest room, watching the snow change the landscape outside, she thought about how strange this path had been. A snowstorm, a stranger at her door, and now this unexpected chance at something she had stopped believing in. After her heartbreak in the city, she had retreated to the safety of home. She had told herself it was enough. But now, standing here, she realized how much she had closed herself off from possibility. Maybe that was what Maximilian meant about showing her bigger dreams. Not dreams of wealth or status, but the courage to open her heart again, to risk pain for the chance at joy. In the next room, Maximilian lay awake, thinking the same thoughts. The man he had been just weeks ago wouldn't recognize the man he was becoming. Clara had awakened something in him that had been asleep for years. Not just the ability to love, but the desire to help, to make a difference in the world. Christmas morning arrived bright and clear. The snow had stopped falling during the night. Clara woke up to sunlight streaming through the windows and the smell of coffee in the air. When she went into the kitchen, she found Maximilian at the table with a simple breakfast laid out, eggs and toast. "I'm not much of a cook," Maximilian said with a shy smile, "but I can manage eggs and toast." Clara laughed, the tension between them easing. "It looks perfect." They ate breakfast and talked about practical things, how often he could visit the farm, how she might go to New York sometimes. They also talked about Darius, the Christmas tree business, and Maximilian's new vision for his company. There were no big promises, just two people finding their way, step by step. After breakfast, Maximilian drove Clara home. As they pulled up to the Hawthorne farm, Clara felt a little worried about what her father would think. But when they arrived, her father was waiting on the porch, smiling. "Figured you'd be back today," he said, and Clara hugged him tightly. "Merry Christmas, Dad. I'm sorry I left last night." "Don't be. Some things are worth going after." Darius shook Maximilian's hand warmly. "Good to see you again, son, under better circumstances this time." Maximilian smiled. "Merry Christmas, sir. I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all," Darius said. "Christmas is better with a full house." Inside the cabin, it was warm and cozy, decorated with Christmas decorations Clara had made with her mother. A simple tree stood in the corner, decorated with ornaments collected over the years. Maximilian looked around, feeling a warmth he had never felt in his fancy life. This was what he had been missing, belonging to something bigger than himself. As they sat down for a simple Christmas, Maximilian caught Clara looking at him thoughtfully. "What's on your mind?" he asked quietly. "I was just thinking," Clara said, "how different this must be from your usual Christmas." Maximilian thought about his old holidays, fancy dinners, expensive gifts, and parties where no one really cared about Christmas. "It's different," he said, "but in all the ways that matter." Later that evening, Maximilian knew he had to leave. There were still meetings and work waiting for him. But as he stood on the porch, watching the sunset turn the snow into gold and pink, he said, "I should go, but I'll be back next weekend, if that's okay." Clara nodded, leaning against him. "Next weekend." "And maybe you could come to New York sometime," Maximilian said. "See my world." I'd like that, Clara said, surprised. After leaving the city years ago, she had always been afraid to go back, but with Maximilian by her side, she felt ready to face the old memories. Before leaving, Maximilian reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, simple package. I almost forgot. Merry Christmas, Clara. Clara unwrapped it carefully and found a delicate silver snowflake ornament. It's beautiful, she said, holding it up to catch the light. I had it made after I got back to New York, Maximilian said, to remind me of the storm that changed everything. Clara smiled, understanding the meaning. I'll hang it on our tree every year. The words every year hung in the air between them, a hopeful promise for the future. Not a guarantee, but the possibility of something they hadn't imagined just weeks ago. As they said goodbye, their kiss was a beginning and a promise, not of happily ever after, but of the commitment to try, to grow and build something real, one step at a time. As Maximilian drove away from the Hawthorne Christmas tree farm, he felt peace. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There were still two different worlds, a father who didn't approve, and many challenges to face. But for the first time in his life, Maximilian Storm wasn't measuring success by his bank account or business deals. Real success, he realized, was found in moments like this, in connections that change you, in the courage to be vulnerable, in letting your heart lead, even when logic says otherwise. As he looked back at the Hawthorne farm, Maximilian smiled. He wasn't saying goodbye. He was just taking the first step on a new path, a path that would always lead him back to Clara and the Christmas tree farm, where he had learned that the greatest luxury in life wasn't what you owned, but who you loved. Thanks for watching. If you liked the story, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Check out our other videos too. See you in the next one.